The phantom child of Route 66. Emma Larson killed the ambulance siren in her head the way she always did, by counting the last 10 heartbeats she felt in her hands. She had learned long ago that hands remembered what eyes tried to forget. Tonight they remembered a boy with a bicycle helmet split like a cracked egg, a grandmother whose last words were a recipe measurement, half a cup, and somewhere between them a man who gripped her wrist and said he wasn't ready yet. 16 hours of emergencies, triaged and charted, taped to the end of another workweek. The clock on her dashboard read 1:03 a.m. The hospital lights dwindled behind her like stars losing faith. Albuquerque thinned to a hunched line of sodium lamps, then a scatter of porch bulbs, then nothing but the low black of the desert. The highway unspooled under her tires, a gray ribbon made of fatigue and habit. She promised Leela she'd be home by morning. "I'll make pancakes before school, I swear." Leela had rolled her eyes the way teenagers do when they can't afford to admit they're relieved. Emma smiled, remembering the pink post-it her daughter had stuck to the fridge. "Mom, stop bringing the hospital home. We have enough ghosts." Sharp kid. Too sharp by half. Route 66 rose out of the darkness as if it had been waiting for her. In daylight, that stretch felt like nostalgia playing itself on loop. Kitschy motel signs, faded murals of cowboys in chrome, weather-beaten diners claiming the world's best of something you couldn't prove. But at 1 in the morning the paint peeled back to reveal bones. The old mother road didn't lead anywhere. It just held you while the desert considered you. Emma rolled her shoulders and cracked her window a tiny inch. The August air came in warm, threaded with dust and the faintest hint of creosote from a storm that had rumbled out to Arizona. Her SUV, a practical, unromantic machine with 3 coffee stains in the cup holder, hummed steady. The GPS was dead air. She didn't need it. She could do this drive in her sleep and usually did. She passed a motel whose neon vacancy sign had lost its end, so the glow said VACACY, which felt honest. Beyond it, a billboard slouched into its supports, the face of a smiling family washed to the same chalky beige, their happiness sandblasted to anonymity. Somewhere out there, coyotes loped in their smart, sideways run and snakes cooled on sun-bleached asphalt. The first oddness was small enough to explain away. Flicker in the corner of her eye that was just her eyelid sticking for a beat. A shape at the shoulder that turned into a prickly pear when she properly looked. The radio hissed, breathing like a sleeping animal. She reached for the dial to nudge it from static to music, but the FM band had turned into a long, smooth stretch of nothing. Even the country station that bragged it could outshout the mountains was down. The display showed 87.9 and then, as if the radio had shrugged. "Fine," she said to the empty car. "We can listen to you, Night." The abandoned gas station announced itself by smell first, the particular petrochemical ghost that never entirely disperses. The canopy over the pumps had caved at one corner, the steel bent like taffy. The sign that used to list prices now held only numbers 5 degrees off, 2, 8, 3, 7. The office window was a dark mirror. She'd driven this way 3 times in the last month and never noticed it. Or maybe she had and had let her eyes slide off it the way you do with things that feel like a dare. She glanced at the digital clock again. 1:17. 15 minutes to nowhere special, 30 to the truck stop outside Moriarty where the coffee was bad but the lights were forgiving. She touched the lanyard that held her ID badge, still looped around the gearshift. The plastic was warm, the printed letters Emma LARSON, RN, Emergency SCRVICS barely scuffed. She should take it off? She never did. Her headlights combed the road ahead and froze. A boy stood in the lane, no more than 8, small enough that the beam carried him along like a held breath. He wore a gray hoodie with the sleeves pushed to his wrists, shadowed shorts, bare knees pale. His sneakers were the cheap kind you buy at the last minute before school starts. The hood lay forward, covering his face in a pocket of darkness. By the time Emma's brain caught up to what her eyes were insisting, the SUV had already slowed. Hands remembered before thought again, foot traveled to brake with the reflex of 1,000 near misses. She felt the mild lurch of a DVD case sliding on the passenger seat. Child, center lane, no reflectors, no movement. Her internal triage voice clipped and calm. Assess, avoid, don't stop on the shoulder if you can help it. Early warning signs of trap, where had that come from? She hated the way some of her colleagues said it, a person in crisis as a setup, a worst-case overlay painted onto every scene. But the thought was here now, a metal taste in her mouth. She flicked her high beams. The hood did not lift. The boy's head tilted not toward her but a fraction sideways, as if he were aligning with some sound she could not hear. The movement was not wrong, not broken, but it was unchildlike in a way Emma's body recoiled from. Children fidgeted, bounced, undulated with nervous energy. This stillness had intent inside it. "Hey," she said absurdly to her windshield. "What are you doing, baby?" If she stopped, she could put him in the car. Calling 911 would be many minutes of geography with a dispatcher who couldn't triangulate anything out here without markers. She could drive him to the truck stop and sit under the fluorescents and feed him donut holes and ask him who he belonged to. Hospital had taught her that the world did not always have adults in it when it needed them. Sometimes the adult was you at 1:18 in the morning. She had almost eased the wheel to the right when she saw the movement at the edge of the station. 2 men peeled out of the shadows near the collapsed canopy. Not a step exactly. More like a casual uncurling, like they'd been there all along, folded into the darkness, and had decided at the same moment to exist. Dark jackets, the kind you wear to not be described later. jeans with the desert ragging the hems. They walked without hurry, coming angled across the gravel as if the road had invited them. She didn't know she'd said no out loud until the sound of it startled her. Her hands came back to the wheel, light but ready. The men weren't waving or yelling. One of them lifted a hand to adjust his cap and then left it there, palm facing the road, a casual traffic cop gesture that made her chest thump. The other kept his hands loose at his sides, fingers jazzing, a jittering detail that red knife to Emma's entire history. She scanned for details the way her training lived to do. Height, build, gait, distinguishing marks. Their faces stayed underlit and anonymous. Their shoulders shadow squared. It would take 6 seconds to reach her if she stopped, 3 if she left the door open. Don't, she whispered to herself, and then because she could not help it, because some part of her still belonged to every child who had ever needed her. What about the boy? She hit the horn, 2 quick taps that had the honk of a scold rather than an alarm. The boy didn't startle. His chin angled again, another small inhuman calibration. Emma's radio, which had offered only snow for 20 miles, crackled like someone tearing cloth. Elp, she froze. The sound could have been a word or a scraped fragment of one. The speaker hissed again, the sound yawning open, then collapsed into silence. She stared at the display, static pressed against the inside of the car like breathing through cot. Help me. This time it came clear enough to decide it was not her imagining. Childish, not crying, that was somehow worse. Her body made a decision before she did. She angled the wheel just so, giving the boy the widest berth she could without surrendering the center line. The SUV nudged left, not much. Enough to signal, I see you, I'm not stopping, I won't hit you. It was a nurse's compromise, and she hated herself for it even as she performed it. The man with the jittering fingers tilted his head up, finally showing her a sliver of face, cheekbone grimy, a pale crescent of a smile that wasn't pleasure. The other lifted his hand higher, the universal sign for wait, and stepped off the gravel so his boot heel clicked on old pavement. He didn't look at the boy. Neither of them did, that decided it. Emma's foot found the accelerator with a steadiness that felt like betrayal. I'm sorry, she said, and didn't know to whom. As the SUV slid past, the boy's hood turned that same fraction, tracking something just off her left fender. Emma fought the idiot urge to duck. For a second, the angle of her headlights revealed the inside of the hood, the fabric thinning, the small seam where a tag had been ripped away. No face, not because it wasn't there, but because the interior had become a place light could not get to. Her right mirror caught motion, one of the men stepping onto the road with a lazy inevitability, as if they had the right of way because the night said so. The other raised both hands to shoulder height like a marshaller on a tarmac, and for an instant no more Emma had the hallucination that they were signaling not to her but to something above her. The SUV roof shivered in a crosswind that hadn't existed a moment ago. Her radio coughed. Don't stop. The voice was new. Lower, older, more sand in it, not the boy and not any DJ. The words were so tight they felt like they'd been squeezed through a pipe. Then static, so loud it prickled her scalp. Emma flinched. The steering wheel skated half an inch under her hands, eyes on the line. Breathe, she accelerated. The speedometer lifted 45, 55, and the engine made a sound like relief. The station thrummed past her peripheral vision, and the road widened into a stretch that had once been proud of its width. The desert revealed a low clump of scrub, the faint shapes of fence posts tired of their job. The sky had no stars. She noticed that as an afterthought and then didn't, because noticing it too directly made her feel as if she'd stepped into a room where the furniture had been rearranged while she was out. She checked her rear view. The men stood in the road like punctuation marks you could not parse. Behind them the boy was a small, precise vertical. None of them moved. She breathed. She wanted to laugh, the hysterical kind that curdles halfway up. You didn't stop at strangers in the night. You didn't pick up hitchhikers with hoodies. You didn't let urban legends hitch a ride in your head. She felt the speech forming that she'd give herself later in the kitchen, leaning on the counter while Leela poured cereal. Don't make the world weird, Mom. It's weird enough. Her headlights climbed an easy hill and took a bend that would aim her toward the interstate feeder. She could call from there with bars and a tower and the comforting hold music of bureaucracy. I'd like to report suspicious individuals at mile marker. Her brain filled in the number as if she'd already seen it. 233. The radio hissed again. Emma. Her hand slammed cold. No one said your name on dead air. No one said your name on a road that hadn't had a living frequency for 20 minutes. She reached for the dial and didn't touch it. She said, "Who is this?" in a voice so steady she felt like she'd borrowed it from a better version of herself. Silence. Not even the breathing static. A full absence. Then, as if from the bottom of a well, don't, and a jolt of something that might have been laughter and might have been a cough. Turn around. She wouldn't have, except that telling someone not to do a thing is the same as teaching them the thought of it. The car's cabin felt suddenly crowded, as if someone had come along for the ride and was sitting very still in the back seat, polite as a shadow. She fought the pull of the rearview mirror and lost by an inch, then 2. The glass held the small frame of the boy, absurdly far and still direct, as if distance were not a fact for him. The 2 men had moved again, not toward the road but toward each other, closing the space like parentheses. The desert wind rose for a heartbeat and laid down again. Her eyes burned. She remembered that she had not cried at work, not once, not when the grandmother had said half a cup and fixed her with irritable, lucid eyes, and then gone where recipes don't matter. She didn't want to give the night her tears. She swallowed them like a pill you don't have water for. Mile marker 231 slid by, then 232. She was doing 65, then 70. The road unspooled obediently. Her body began to believe in the ordinary again. Her headlights caught another sign, this one hand-painted on plywood and nailed to a post listing slightly in the sand. The paint had run in a rain that the board had not survived intact. The letters were doubled, ghosting themselves. She read it anyway because it is impossible not to read words laid in your path. Slow down. She did reflexively and then swore at herself and eased back up. The rear view tempted again. The radio, as if responding to the twitch of her eyes, coughed one last time and soft, almost tender, let the child's voice back through. Help me. The tone was different, not pleased, not pleading. Listening, Emma's foot hovered. She could still stop. That thought, I could turn around, arrived like an offering you know is a trap. She kept driving. But a mile ahead, where the road pooled its limited light, something new waited on the shoulder. A figure standing beside a stalled sedan with its hazards pulsing, red, 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 like a heartbeat calling a code blue. Emma's palms went wet on the wheel. And in the hush between blinks, the impossible decision lifted its head again. The sedan's hazards pulsed like a wound that refused to clot. Red, 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 steady as a metronome. Wrong as a metronome in a hospital room where everything else is chaos, but the beeping won't admit it. The car sat half on the shoulder, half in the travel lane, nose angled out as if it had tried to rejoin the road and thought better of it. Beside it stood a figure, hands lifted shoulder high, palms open to the night. The posture said I'm harmless and I'm watched at the same time. A woman, Emma thought, but the hazard light rhythm flattened detail into silhouette. The reflective strip on a windbreaker flashed for a heartbeat, there and gone. Emma's foot came off the gas. Training, stubborn as an old scar, took the wheel. She clicked her own hazards on and eased left to give space. Her mind recited protocols she'd taught to paramedic interns 100 times. Use your car as a barrier. Do not stop in an active lane if you can avoid it. Park upstream of the scene, angle wheels away from traffic, leave the engine running, keep doors locked. Scan for additional hazards, people, power lines, fuel, traffic flow, additional hazards. The phrase always sounded like it could cover anything the world wanted. She checked her phone. One bar shivered into existence, then folded like a bad hand. Okay, she told the steering wheel. We do this smart. At 40 yards, the woman's face slid into the headlight penumbra, mid-30s, hair damp and stuck to her cheeks, an expression that hovered between relief and panic. She wore running shoes gone mud dark. Her lips formed words Emma couldn't hear through glass and engine. Thank you or please or the old highway prayer, stop. Emma let the SUV coast until she was even with the sedan's rear bumper, then eased ahead another car length. She angled right wheels toward the dirt shoulder, left wheels in the lane to create a triangular pocket of space. The angle threw a wash of light across the stalled car's hood and the woman's forearms. Goose flesh prickled Emma's own skin in sympathy. Two details didn't fit. First, the hazard blink wasn't quite synced. The left and right blinkers should alternate in perfect cadence. This was a heartbeat and an echo of that heartbeat, half a beat late. The sort of glitch you only notice if you've lived too long with machines that keep people alive. Second, there was no steam and no smell. A car that dies in the desert at night still has breath. It ticks and sighs. Radiator vapor laces the air with the faint sweet rot of coolant. This sedan sat too politely, too cleanly, as if placed. Emma cracked her window the width of a finger. Warm air pressed in. Are you hurt? She called, pitching her voice to carry without sounding like an order. The woman flinched at the sound. That rang true. People were always skittish in emergency light, but she didn't look at Emma. Her eyes drifted past to the roofline of the SUV, then a fraction higher, like someone listening for rain on a tent. Emma felt the old animal between her shoulder blades stand up. She thumbed the window switch up again. I've called it in, she lied, clear as a bell. Highway patrol is on the way. The woman's hands lowered an inch. Her mouth formed no signal. Then with an exaggerated slowness that would play well if viewed from a distance, she pointed at her right front tire. Flat, her lips said, Jack. Emma glanced where the woman pointed. Tire looked okay at first take. When she squinted, she saw it, not flat but bled. A sprinkle of glitter along the tread, heads of small nails perhaps, a slow sabotage instead of a blowout. The kind of damage that lets a car limp off the freeway and die under the first shelter it finds. Shelter like an abandoned gas station, or an overpass, or a place where the sight lines were long enough for watchers to read your choices. She adjusted her mirror. The road behind was an empty scroll. The abandoned station lay a bend back out of view. The sky remained starless. She hated that the way a nurse hates a monitor with a dead strip. What aren't you showing me? The radio breathed to life just long enough to say, Ma, and then swallowed its own name. Hers. She turned the volume knob down with 2 careful clicks as if she could moderate the night by stepping it toward quiet. Emma, the woman at the sedan, tried the name out like a guess. The sound didn't come from outside. Emma's rear speakers burped a soft crackle, kids' cartoon static, television on in a room you've left. Then a boy's voice threaded itself into the air-conditioned hush of the cabin, puzzled and attentive. Are you going to help me? Not pleading. Curious like you ask a teacher, are we doing math now? She didn't look in the rear view. It took all the discipline in her body. She kept her eyes on the woman, who only stood with her hands hovering at thigh level now, as if trying to invent a gesture that would reach across glass. Behind the woman, the sedan's dark inside felt like the interior of that hoodie, a pocket where light didn't stick. Get back in your car, Emma said, and put 4 years of ER charge nurse into the sentence. Lock the doors. Sit tight. If you have a hazard triangle or flares, do not deploy them, just get inside. The woman shook her head, not in refusal but as if she had been waiting for the line and hadn't rehearsed her next cue. Her gaze snagged on something above Emma's left shoulder and clung there. Emma braked, not the SUV, her body braked. Don't look at what people look at, her first mentor had said long ago, bandaging a drunk split scalp. Look at their hands. The woman's fingers trembled. Left ring finger bare, a tan line fatting, right pinky bent at a slight angle, old fracture. She rotated her wrist without thinking as if it hurt. She was real then in the small, unbeautiful ways real people are. Please, the boy's voice said, very close to Emma's left ear, like he stood outside the driver window and had leaned in. Don't leave me. Her mouth grew dry. She turned her head an inch and saw her own reflection in the side mirror, a pale oval in the rim of the window, the highway beyond like a river made of erasers. In that thin slice of glass she saw motion that wasn't hers, the top of a hood shifting, a small tilt calibrating to the mirror's angle as if seeing itself for the first time. Every nerve brightened. Emma reached, without looking down, for the center console and popped the glove compartment. Her hand found the emergency wedge she kept for windshields, the little orange hammer with the seatbelt blade. She set it on her thigh, the weight steadied her. Ma'am, she said to the woman, I can pace you to the truck stop, 30 miles, I'll stay behind you with hazards on, if you slow I slow, if you stop I stop, we go together. For the first time the woman's eyes clicked to meet Emma, squarely like a magnet finding metal. Relief swam up through the panic, real enough that Emma wanted to cry again for reasons that made no sense. The woman nodded. Okay. She moved like someone emerging from a hold she hadn't known she was under. She reached for her door handle. And froze mid-reach, head tipped, listening, not to Emma, not to anything Emma could claim. Don't, Emma said, voice low and fierce. Just get inside now. A shape detached itself from the night on the far side of the sedan where Emma's headlights didn't reach, not a full figure. A suggestion, the density where darkness has a shoulder. It leaned and then unleaned like a man changing his mind and then changing it back. The woman's head jerked toward it, then crabbed back to Emma, apology and terror competing on her face. Emma put the SUV in drive and inched forward until her bumper nearly kissed the sedan's spare tire well. She threw more light across the far side. The shape flattened, lost nerve, or simply became two verticals of scrub grass making their own shadow. Now, Emma said, get in. The woman moved, fast and graceless. Her door shrieked like an animal. She flopped into the seat, hands slapping the steering wheel for purchase. The door thumped. The dome light flicked on a brief, intimate square that showed a purse, a child's sticker on the glove box, a parking pass from a gym. Then it went dark. Emma exhaled. She lifted her phone again. 2 bars flickered into 3, then trembled back to 1. She thumbed 911, held the phone to the windshield where maybe the glass could teach it how to reach higher. The call stuttered, spun, aborted. The boy's voice returned, whisper close, as if he had put his mouth against the seam where window meets frame. They don't like that. Neither do I, Emma said, and was startled to hear herself almost smile. She tapped her horn twice, light taps, the sound of a friend outside saying ready. The sedan's brake lights flared, relaxing like a red muscle. It edged forward, tire making a small complaint. Emma rolled with it, giving space, creating the cocoon of moving light they'd inhabit together. It made 10 yards without dying, then 20. The road bent and straightened. The desert returned to its patient examination. Emma kept her speed at 35. She watched the sedan's shoulders for the hunch that meant true failure. In her mirror, the long black behind remained undisturbed. At the 30-yard mark, the radio wheezed and did a fair impression of a human clearing its throat. A man's voice came up from the well bottom again, less distant now and more annoyed that he had to keep repeating himself. Don't turn around. I'm not, she said, because talking to Ghost was still talking, and left unsaid the I want to that trailed it. She kept her gaze on taillights and the lane line sliding into the future. They drove. Minutes congealed. The boy murmured once, almost like a child who checks your patience as you approach a promised destination. The radio stitched it static. The sky refused to give back a single star. At mile marker 233, the sedan twitched. Not much. Enough to whisper warning through the brake lights. Emma flashed her eyes twice. I see you. I'm here. The sedan corrected, steady again. That was when the world tried a new thing. Up ahead, the road widened to a long straightaway, the kind where heat shimmer makes even daylight look like it's thinking of bending. On the right shoulder, where the sand softened, 2 figures waited outside the draft of their headlight cone, just out of the good light where faces go to become theories. They weren't the woman's shape. They weren't silhouettes produced by accident. They stood the way furniture stands placed, jackets dark, jeans ghosted pale at the knees. One man's hands hung loose and jittering, an insect's wingbeat of fingers, the tell that Emma's body had already filed under knife. The other lifted his palm at chest level and held it there, an endless, patient wait. I see you, Emma said to the windshield. She said it as if she were telling the night what it was, and the night would have to agree. The sedan eased left, giving them distance. The men didn't step. They didn't have to. The road narrowed itself around them like a ritual. Almost, the boy breathed, so close now she could have reached into the sound and touched fabric. Emma adjusted the wheel a degree, another. She took the center of the lane back for herself. The men tracked her without moving, the way scarecrows track the harvest. As the sedan drew parallel to them, the jitter-fingered one tipped his head, and the hood's shadow parted just enough to show something that had learned to look like a smile and had not learned what to put under it. Emma let the SUV's engine speak. The speed lifted to 40, 42. The road gave them room to pass. The men remained where they were and yet somehow paced them, the trick of a painting whose eyes follow you down a hall. Once past, the urge to glance in the mirror clawed back up her spine, feral and alive. She held her eyes forward until they watered, blinked, fixed on the sedan's tailpipe like it could tell her a story about combustion more interesting than fear. Behind, in the place she refused to look, feet shifted on old pavement. Palms rose to shoulder height and held, as if signaling something that did not need light. The radio clicked off, not to static, to a clean medical silence. The truck stop when it came would be 30 miles, then 29, then just keep going, like a mantra you take one breath at a time. But the desert, not content with men and a child, offered its last test before the lights. A figure stepping out from the darkness 50 yards ahead, right where the shoulder melted into the lane, one arm raised to flag them down and one arm hanging broken straight, the angle a simple wrongness that made Emma's teeth ache. The sedan jerked. The woman's brake lights flared, indecisive, hope and dread grinding their gears. Emma rolled her window down a crack and spoke to whatever rode the air with them. "Listen to me," she said, voice as sure as a crash cart charge. "We don't stop in the dark." Something in the car shifted, a tiny rearrangement the way a backseat passenger settles to see better. The boy's whisper came so gentle it could have been the breath of desert through a cholla. "Okay." Ahead, the figure with the wrong arm turned its head, the movement hitching like a radio trying to find the next word. The truck stop's lights were still 30 miles away. Emma tightened her hands on the wheel and prepared to teach the night a rule it had forgot. At 50 yards, the figure with the wrong arm lowered his raised hand and began to walk toward the lane line, not fast, not slow, like a person trusting that decency would do what physics couldn't. The broken arm hung unnaturally straight, no swing, no pain response, at 40 yards. The face resolved into features only long enough for Emma to understand that the eyes weren't looking at her so much as past her, measuring her space for someone else. The sedan ahead of her drifted right, then left, brake lights hiccuping the way a body hiccups when it can't decide between running and freezing. Emma flashed her eyes twice and rolled a small breath through her nose. The boy's voice was a listening presence near her left ear. "We don't stop in the dark," she said again, as if she were instructing a rookie on a first code. "Repeat it." A pause, the kind of silence a classroom makes when the teacher asks a question and students are not sure whether repeating will make them responsible. "We don't stop in the dark," he said. The sentence landed like the first time a kid trusts a rule more than a feeling. Emma eased left. The sedan took the cue, sliding with her. The figure with the wrong arm didn't accelerate to intercept, didn't lift his head to plead. He simply turned, pivoting on heels that made no sound in their world, and began walking parallel with them, eyes fixed on the exact space between their bumpers. She kept her speed at 35. The figure kept pace like a shadow keeping its owner. He was a moving punctuation mark, the kind that turns a statement you thought you were making into a question. "Mile marker 234, Emma said aloud to keep her brain pinned to numbers and facts. The green sign bit the night and fell away. 26 miles to the truck stop. Highway patrol. Coffee so stale it tried to sell itself as a flavor. People, you can go faster, the boy suggested, polite as if not wanting to push his luck. "No," she said, "we go together." The sedan rode out its panic. The brake lights steadied. The woman was learning the pace like a song. The road straightened and gave them the gift of a horizon, and on that line a smear of industrial glow asserted a presence that might be a town or a yard or salvation if you credited the human appetite for fluorescent light. Emma's radio cracked hard enough to pop in her speakers. "Down," the man's voice rasped. "Don't slow down." The words arrived with a burr, as if dragged through gravel. "I hear you," she said. She did not thank him. Behind her, the figure with the wrong arm peeled away, takes his distance like a performer bowing after realizing the audience has chosen not to participate. He walked backward for a moment, head still tilted, as if recalibrating the physics of refusal, and then turned and let the night take him where it wanted. The men, her men from the station edge, returned at mile 235. They stood together on the median this time, a pair of parentheses holding the road as if they could squeeze it thinner. Their jackets didn't reflect. Their faces remained a negative. The jitter-fingered one flexed his hand, then stilled it by tugging at his sleeve as if pulling the nervousness down like a shade. The other lifted his palm again, calm as a lake. "Wait," said the gesture. On the wind, a smell like old oil and cold breath. "Stay in the lane," Emma whispered, not sure if she intended it for herself or the woman or the night. She angled the SUV a degree toward the stripe. The sedan followed obediently. The men did not move. The space between them seemed to the way heat shimmer moves in summer. As the two vehicles slipped by, a pressure pushed against the glass as if the air itself had hands. Emma's shoulders tightened around an urge to apologize to no one. Boy said nothing, but she felt absurdly the sensation of him reaching for something to hold, her sleeve, her hair, the seam of the seat, stopping an inch shy the way a child remembers at the last second not to touch a hot pan. Once they passed, the pressure dropped. The night exhaled, insulted. Emma did not look back. The rear view showed only her own eyes, wide and salt-bright, for a strobe of a second before she forced herself to look forward again. 25 miles, she told the dashboard. That's nothing. Almost, the boy said, softer now, a word put on tiptoe. The road began to rise just enough to prove that Earth remembers how to be a body. The glow ahead consolidated into a shape that read as infrastructure. Poles, a warren of roofs, a scatter of signs that light liquefied and refroze into words. Emma knew the truck stopped silhouette like a nurse knows the hospital from 5 blocks out. It wasn't beautiful, but it was a kind of promise. At mile 238, a semi barreled toward them from the far lane, lights high and angry, horn yawling like a grievance. The blast of displaced air shuttered the SUV and slapped the sedan's flank. The woman's car slewed a foot and recovered. Good, Emma breathed, automatic, stay with me. Her hands did not shake. Her jaw did. The boy made a small sound the way children do when something loud makes their bones vibrate, not fear exactly, but overstimulation turned into breath. Do you have a name? Emma asked before she could stop herself. It felt important to ask like it had felt important to learn the names of patients before intubation. She knew better, she asked anyway. The radio, as if offended by her attempt to see farther than she was allowed, died to silence so complete she wondered if she'd imagined its earlier generosity. The boy didn't answer. Okay, she said, that's all right. At mile 241, the road reset the test. Not a figure, not men. Just absence tamped into a tidy shape. A sedan pulled onto the shoulder with all 4 doors open, its dome light broadcasting a sterile square, its engine ticking its cool-down ticks. No one inside. The emptiness felt deliberate, a made bed in a motel with no desk clerk. On the windshield, taped at eye level, something white fluttered in the slipstream as they passed. Paper with words on it, she thought, but the font looked wrong, as if the letters had been drawn by someone who knew A and E and had never met S. Keep going, she told the woman she could not see. The sedan's tail stayed steady. The idea of the taped paper planted itself in Emma's mind like a splinter. It wanted her, the part of her that hoarded last notes and toe tags and bracelets, and she told it no and felt it remain anyway. At mile 245, the horizon broke. The truck stop didn't feel like a smear anymore. It had edges and limbs. One giant sign declared Open 24 HRS in an honest, overbright red that made everything else look like it was working too hard. The gas canopy threw white onto asphalt until the black wanted to hurry back in and fix it. A squat diner squatted more earnestly than most buildings. A spray of semis slept at angles, their chrome eyelids down. Emma's throat worked. She tasted old coffee and new relief. See. She said to the boy and to herself and to the woman and to the men and to the figure with the wrong arm and to the grandmother who had said half a cup like a password. See the lights. I see, the boy whispered. His tone had shifted, not pleased, not relieved, interested the way a tourist is interested in a landmark they've only seen on a postcard. As they took the exit ramp, the SUV's tires sang the corrugated warning strip a moment, and the sound came up through the steering column like a laugh. The sedan's blinker came on, an honest rhythm now, left, 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 no glitch. They slid under the spell of the truck stop lights and the world simplified into catalogued objects. Pumps, windows, a trash can with a lid like a hat. Emma paced the sedan into a bay nearest the diner. She rolled to a stop at the far pump, angled again to create space, her habits clicking through her as surely as any ritual. The woman's car settled. Her door opened with a human grunt this time, no shriek. She unfolded from the seat, eyes huge and wet, and in the convex mirror above the pump she was both small and all right. Emma killed her engine and did not unlock the doors. The boy said nothing. The radio said nothing. The knight's hands were outside the light now, feeling in their pockets for new ideas. The woman wavered between car and pump and cash register, then chose toward Emma's door with a kind of flinchy dignity. She cupped her hands at her mouth and said something Emma could lip-read perfectly even though the words didn't match the moment. Thank you. Emma cracked her window 2 fingers width. Inside, she said, nodding toward the diner. Call 911 from the landline. Say your location first. Say it twice. Tell them you need troopers. The woman blinked, startled at the precision, then nodded like she'd been given something to do with her fear. You'll, she started. Will you? I'll be right behind you, Emma said, and lied because she'd learned that sometimes lies were a splint you used to get someone to the table. The woman pressed her lips together and broke into a jog-head duct as if she expected the roof to lower. The diner's door swallowed her. A bell jangled. People turn the way people do when there is drama at 3 in the morning and it isn't theirs. Emma breathed. Her hands finally shook, a fine tremor that rippled the emergency hammer on her thigh. She set it back in the glove compartment and closed the plastic on it like a nurse tucking a sheet. You did it, she said to the empty air. We did it. A beat. Another. The boy exhaled, a slow, thoughtful sound. What now? He asked. Emma pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The cheap leather smelled like old sunlight. She could right now go inside, sit in the booth under the buzzing light, drink coffee so bad she'd be able to describe it in court, give statements to a trooper whose pen would stop twice and scratch hard to catch up. She could ask for the cameras and see what the cameras had seen, which would be nothing or too much. She could right now turn the key and go home, pull into the driveway quiet so Leela's sleep didn't have to wake and defend itself. She could press her palm to that pink post-it on the fridge and say, you're right, baby. We have enough ghosts. We don't need to import anymore. A knock at the passenger window made her jump hard enough that her neck snapped. She turned. A man stood there, late 50s, trucker cap, the permanent sunburn of someone who has made a living between exits. His face read decent, his posture read careful around women at gas stations at night. He held both hands visible, palms out, the universal not a problem. She lowered the window an inch. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. His voice was rough in the way roads are rough. "We saw you escort her in, my wife's calling it in too." "I'm okay," Emma said. She surprised herself with how much it sounded like she believed it. He nodded. His eyes flicked past her shoulder to the back seat out of habit, a dad move. For a flash, his expression tightened the tiniest bit, and then he smoothed it the way men smooth it when they've decided not to make something your problem. "You got someone with you?" Emma didn't turn. "No," she said, and they both pretended that was a conversation. "You want me to stay while you fuel up?" he offered. "No thank you," she said. "I'm not staying." He tipped his cap, not offended. "Good night, then." He walked away at a normal human speed, toward a normal human wife who had normal human hands on a phone near the normal human bags of beef jerky you buy to make a drive feel like an intention. The radio, petulant and shy, clicked itself to a low, pale static the way a child hums to narrate his own play. Emma shut it off with a firm thumb. "Not anymore," she told it in her head. "You don't get the sound." She pulled out, rolling under the lights, their hum a balm and an interrogation both. She did not look at the convex mirrors. She did not look at the dark beyond the poles. She put the truck stop in her rear view only because the geometry demanded it, and then moved her eyes back where they belonged. The interstate came on like a certainty. She merged into its idea of safety, which was speed and more light, and felt her pulse begin to believe she might get to Pancakes before school. The boy rode quiet for 10 miles. At mile 255, he spoke again, not from the radio, not from the door seam, but from the simple location of a presence that has made a choice. The back seat slightly left of center, where a child sits when he's trying not to block the driver's mirror. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she answered, because she had never learned how to not answer a child who said that to her. Then more carefully, "What do you need?" The air cooled as if someone had opened a drawer full of old winter. "To get where you're going," he said, in the tone of a kid on a long trip asking which exit holds his name. Emma licked her lips. The taste in her mouth was the taste you get before crying and don't. "No," she said, gently but like the word had a spine. "You can ride to the edge, but you don't come in." He was quiet, thinking it over the way children do, testing the rule against other remembered rules, finding their edges, negotiating with himself, because negotiating with her would involve changing the word no, and he could tell that wasn't on the table. "Okay," he said at last, "but I can see the lights from there." "You can see them," she agreed. She pulled into her neighborhood with the stealth of a thief trying to return what had been taken. The world had reset to the version where sprinklers click on brittle grass and porch lights kneel at doorways, and a cat crosses the street with the implacable entitlement of all cats. She parked by muscle memory, killed the engine, listened to the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal. The house exhaled its ordinary. She unlocked the door and stood a beat inside, letting the dark recognize her. The fridge hummed a household hymn. The pink posted on the stainless steel square read exactly as before. "Mom, stop bringing the hospital home. We have enough ghosts." Her laugh came out as a sound you make when you're tired and grateful for the evidence of your child's ferocity. She turned the kitchen radio on low. Habit of mornings, not nights, but the silence had begun to feel like a fund she could not afford to leave unused. The radio offered weather and a song from 10 years ago that had the nerve to feel like an old friend. Partly cloudy, highs in the mid-90s. Sunrise at 6:22. The voice did not say her name. She poured water. Her hands were steady now. She looked toward the hallway that led to Leela's room. She did not go. Some rules were for them as much as for you. "Edge," she said softly, not turning to the idea of the SUV parked in the driveway behind her and the thing that had ridden it. "You stop at the edge." The house listened. The radio sang a bar of something and forgot the next word in the way radios forgive themselves. A minute later, the heater kicked a shoulder in the ductwork, the sound like a foot on a wooden stair. Emma closed her eyes. Her mind tried to inventory every wrongness, the starless sky, the figure's wrong arm, the men's patient palms, the way a hood can make a face into a pocket that doesn't take light. She opened her eyes and let the inventory go. She put water on for pancakes. She cracked eggs. She shook cinnamon into batter because cinnamon is what you do when the world gives you back your house and your child is asleep in it and will be hungry. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it buzz twice, then thumbed the call open, ready to give a statement to a trooper who would believe some of it and file the rest where strange things go in reports. "Ma'am, this is Highway Patrol," a professional voice said, clipped but not unkind. "We got your call and a couple others. Units checked the mile markers you reported. No one there now. Will increase presence on that stretch if you could come by later today." "I can," she said. "After school." He paused, hearing what she'd given away. "Yes, ma'am, after school," they ended with bureaucratic grace. She set the phone down and flipped the first pancake. The house smelled like cinnamon, saying, "We are alive." Dawn flirted with the edge of the blinds. From the living room, the radio lost its station for 1 second, a single, clean pop of static, and in that gap a boy's voice slipped through, almost fond. "Help me?" Her hand tightened on the spatula. She stared at the pan until butter spit and calm. She did not turn the radio off. She did not turn it up. She kept it where it was because giving it volume would make a church of it and cutting it would make a dare. Footsteps scuffed the hall. Leela, hair like a lion's, eyes half shut, teenager gravity dragging her into the kitchen on a vector toward carbs. "You're home," she said, like accusing a cat of being a cat. "I'm home," Emma said. "Pancakes." Leela sniffed. "You put cinnamon, fancy." The radio found its song again and went on as if the interruption had been part of the music. "Hey," Leela said, pulling a mug from the cabinet. "We still have ghosts." Emma set a pancake on her daughter's plate and kissed the top of her head. "We have rules," she said. Then gently, for both of them, "We don't stop in the dark." Leela gave her a look that meant "I'm going to ask later, but not now," and ate. At the kitchen window, the sky had found a star after all, a pale one that might have been a plane, might have been permission. Outside, at the edge where driveway becomes street, shadows pooled in the way shadows do when they're deciding whether to spend another hour or go find a different house. Emma looked there once and then looked away. She would never drive Route 66 at 1 in the morning again. She would buy a dash cam and then some nights turn its microphone off. She would teach herself to ignore radios that learned her name. She would make pancakes on mornings after 16-hour shifts and write notes to herself on the fridge in a new color that does not invite the dead to edit. At school drop-off, Leela would hop out, sling her bag, look back once and say, "You're good," in a voice that pretended it didn't worry. Emma would say, "I'm good," and both of them would decide to try believing it that day. At night sometimes, in the kind of quiet where even the refrigerator learns to tiptoe, she would hear the tiniest adjustment from the back seat of a car that was not running, the sound a small body makes when it sits up straighter to see the edge of the porch light. "Edge," she would say without turning her head. And most nights, for reasons she would never understand and always respect, the boy would listen. The gas station ambush. The neon sign should have read "Quick Fuel," but 2 letters were dead and the rest flickered like a bad alibi. KIKFL. The canopy lights hummed at different pitches, a choir of tired fluorescents. It was 3:06 a.m. on the outskirts of Atlanta, the part of I-85 where warehouses turned to weeds and the road forgot its manners. Sarah Vega slid her ambulance jacket off her shoulders and dropped it on the passenger seat of her Civic. She'd just come off a double, 24 hours collapsed into one long smear. 3 overdoses, a diabetic hypoglycemic crash, a car wreck that wasn't fatal because physics had chosen kindness for once. Her muscles had the ache of being told to move and then told to stop too many times in a row. Her eyes felt grainy. Home was 13 minutes away if she didn't pick a place like this at 3 in the morning. She told herself she was stopping because the tank was low, and because coffee at this hour would not be optional if she wanted to make it up the apartment stairs without sitting down halfway and choosing sleep on the concrete. Both were true. The lie lived under them. She liked the quiet of late-night gas stations, the way they framed the world into fixed squares of light and let everything else stay theoretical. She pulled into the far bay where the security camera's fisheye dome stared down like a passive god. Her dashboard dinged its low fuel scold. She killed the engine, rolled her shoulders, and stepped out into the warm March air. The pump screen was smudged with the fingerprints of other people's mistakes. She jabbed Pay AT Pump, slid her card, and watched the machine perform its ritual, thinking, judging, granting. The hose coughed when she lifted it. The nozzle clicked home in her tank with the comfort of a decision. The numbers began their climb. From somewhere behind her, a dog barked, the sound coming in short, purposeful bursts. A siren wailed and receded on the far freeway, not hers anymore. Beyond the lot, kudzu had eaten an old chain-link fence, leaving its geometry intact but its purpose romantic. She glanced at the glass of the storefront. The clerk looked like he'd been born under fluorescent lights, lean, jittery hands, a baseball cap tugged low, eyes that tracked without focusing. A rack of scratch-offs fanned behind him like the tail of a cheap peacock. A small TV on the counter played a police procedural with the sound off, captions marching across the bottom as if the show had been told to keep its voice down. "Hey!" The voice came at the exact distance of trust. Too close to be casual, too quiet to be shouted. Gravelly, a smoker's sand. Sarah's hand tightened around the pump handle. She had already cataloged the lot when she pulled in 2 pickup trucks sleeping nose to nose under the far light. A dented Camry on the edge of the property line, no one obviously loitering. There was cover in the ice machine and the propane cages. There were shadows under the overhang near the air pump, but she'd looked at them and they'd looked like themselves. The man stood shoulder close, maybe 5 feet back into her left, inside the lane where you'd hover if you were a friend and didn't want the nozzle to splash you. Unshaven, late 30s or early 40s, worn leather jacket that had seen a lot of hands. He kept both palms visible at chest level like he'd learned to do that recently. "Don't turn around," he said, very calm. "He's at your car." Her body wanted to flinch so badly it made a sound in her throat. She didn't turn. She pulled the nozzle out a notch, a reflex from a training video about avoiding splashback. The numbers on the pump ticked past 11.6, 11.61. The hose vibrated minutely, a living thing. In the reflection on the Civic's rear passenger window, she saw a shape bend. A hooded figure crouched by the door seam, shoulders rounded, hands busy. The glint that flashed at the corner of the window wasn't jewelry. Metal, not quite a knife. The size and posture said pry bar. Or a Slim Jim, or a screwdriver wrapped in tape to give it grip. "Okay," Sarah said, "because you talk as much to your own adrenaline as to a stranger." Her voice was low enough that the pump could have been the one listening. What's your angle? I don't have one, the man said. He didn't move closer. You're not the one he wants your car, he'll want you if you break the script. Sarah's brain did what it had been taught to do in rooms that smelled like bleach and fear. It slowed down and widened out. She saw the things you always saw before the bad thing. The flicker of a failing fluorescent, the abandoned vacuum station with the hanging hose like a noose, the black rectangle of woods beyond the delivery alley. She saw the clerk's head tilt up and away like he'd been trained to give witnesses bad eyesight. Here, what you're gonna do, the man said, still steady. When the pump hits 40, you're going to take the nozzle out. Don't clip it. Don't spill. Hang it like you always do. You're going to open your door. You're going to get in. You're going to drive away. You are not going to check your passenger side. You are not going to check your tire. You are not going to apologize to anyone. And you, Sarah asked. I'm going to tell him he picked wrong, the man said. He likes when people look at him, so don't. The numbers jumped. $34.90. $35. Sarah flexed her right hand on the nozzle and felt the micro-trimmer she had trained herself to ignore when starting IVs in moving vehicles. This is not a patient, she told her body. This is not an assessment. This is leaving alive. In the window reflection, the hooded figure's head tipped. A sliver of face blurred by tint. Cloth shadow instead of features. The tool paused and resumed. Crouch, work, crouch. Hands close to the door seam where you'd slide a gem to pop a lock. Or where you'd tuck something under a handle, zip tie, looped strand waiting to cinch when a hand felt for safety. $38. Why me, she asked. She found herself curious the way you get curious on scene about the mechanism, not the morality. If there was a pattern she could teach later, she wanted it. Because you're tired and you have a badge hanging from your mirror, the man said. Because people think they can sell a medic her own safety. Because you look like you'll follow a rule if someone says it's a rule. He wasn't wrong. Her City of Atlanta EMS placard dangled from the mirror because pulling it off and on every shift was one chore too many. Her hair was braided because hair that isn't contained becomes a liability. Her posture telegraphed fatigue to anyone who knew how to read it. $39.40. $3 breaths, she told herself. In through the nose, count 4, hold, count 2, out, count 6. The pump handle buzzed in her hand as the tank approached capacity. Now, the man said, voice unchanged. Do it. Sarah slid the nozzle free and the pump thunk to its petty indignation. She didn't shake the nozzle to dislodge the last drops, she hung it. The hose rattled. Gasoline ghosts crept up around her shoes. She'd slopped some earlier, she hadn't noticed. She opened her driver door. The car beeped its 2 quick notes. She let the beep be cues for muscle memory. Sit, key, lock. She didn't waste the flicker of a gaze on the passenger's side. She didn't check the blind spot. Her peripheral vision caught the barest reflection of motion, the crouched shape lifting, the hood swiveling like a camera trying to find a face. She closed the door and hit lock. The car thunked its endorsement. She put the key in. Her hands didn't miss the ignition. She threw it to drive before the engine finished clearing its throat. The man's face never quite came into focus, but his expression did for a single syllable of a second, a look like, do it, kid. Sarah did it. The Civic leapt forward, a small, startled animal. The tires chirped as they crossed the painted line. Her heart slapped her sternum. The hooded figure moved the way a person moves when their idea is interrupted, not surprised, exactly offended. He reached for the passenger handle, his fingers snagged and slipped. The door late clicked down as the lock engaged under his hand. His wrist skidded against the glass, leaving a darkness that might have been grease or might have been something that washed off. He pivoted to chase. She didn't give him the geometry. She cut left, threaded between pumps, saw the tail of a pickup hitch, flicked past it with an inch of clearance that would feel like a lie later. The lot exit was a yawning rectangle. She took it. In the rear view, the man in the leather jacket stepped into the hooded figure's path, one hand lifted. The gesture wasn't aggressive, it was declarative, like telling a story with your palm. The hooded figure stopped, which told Sarah he had rules too, and they were easier to anticipate than the night felt. Her breath came in 2-stage bursts. Inhale to fuel thought, exhale to send fuel to muscle. She swung onto the feeder road and let the Civic's small engine do its best impression of serious speed. She reached for her phone one-handed and tapped 911 without taking eyes off the dark ribbon ahead. City of Atlanta 911, what is the address of your emergency? Quick fuel off exit 76 where the letters are dying, she said, faster than breath implied. White hooded male trying to tamper with my passenger door at the pump, another male intervened. I'm in a silver Civic headed south on the feeder. I'm okay. I think I'm okay. Ma'am, do you need medical assistance? I'm a paramedic, she said, then found professionalism. No, I'm safe. I'm advising you might have an attempted robbery or carjacking setup, possibly others in the lot. The clerk didn't look surprised. Description of the suspect, the dispatcher asked. Her voice had the calm of a person looking at a screen that could send the right cars in the right direction. Hooded male, average height, hands gloved or coated in something, used a tool like a slim Jim. The other male, white or light-skinned, leather jacket, mid-40s maybe, cap. He warned me and blocked the suspect when I left. Vehicle involved. Didn't see one. 2 pickups in the back lot, a Camry at the edge, could be watchers. North side of the canopy had dead cameras. She heard herself and added, I don't know that, it's a guess. It's helpful, the dispatcher said, because training has a phrase for when civilians apologize for noticing. Are you in a safe location? Heading to the main, Sarah said. I can pull into the Shell on Riverdale, there are people. If you feel unsafe, do not stop, the dispatcher said. Units are en route to quick fuel. Do you wish to meet with officers? Yes, Sarah surprised herself. At the Shell, I can give a statement. Stay on the line with me. The monotony of the dispatcher's questions steadied Sarah. She recited the numbers you recite to earn help, mile markers, street names, directions. She put concrete under the wheels of her acute fear and turned it into the manageable kind that responds to plans. Her mirrors were empty. No headlights rose to become intentions. She took the right toward the shell, bright and glossy, the kind of chain that changed its bulbs on schedule. She pulled under its light like a refugee finding a flag. A minute later, a patrol car angled in 2 bays away, then a second unit behind it. The officer's approach was tidy, one slow. One a little wider, people who had learned how to enter a scene without teaching it to bite. Sarah let her hands shake now. She blew air out of her cheeks, then cut the engine and stepped into light that felt like a physical thing. "Ma'am," the first officer said, not much older than her, a rasp at the edges of his voice made by coffee and 1,000 small lies. "You're the caller?" "Yes," she said. She squeezed her car keys in her fist until the metal edge bit her palm into a tension. They asked good questions. She gave good answers. She kept her descriptions honest and her speculation labeled. She felt her training mirror theirs and thought about how many jobs felt the same in different uniforms. "Do you want EMS?" the second officer asked at the end out of reflex, then remembered who she was and let a half smile make both of them feel ridiculous for a second. "I'm good," Sarah said. She was not good, she was unhurt. "We'll check quick fuel," the first officer said. "You did right." "At this hour, this stretch," he let the sentence shrug. "If you remember anything else, tattoos, shoes, the way he moved, call the case number. Clerk's cams are probably trash, but the canopy might give us something." She almost told him about the feeling that the clerk had practiced not seeing. She said it anyway. He wrote it down like a hygienic fact. They let her sit in her car while they spoke quietly near their hoods. She watched their body language, the shift of weight, the angle of elbows, the movement of hands away from and toward belts, and felt the adrenaline drop in discrete stages until she could feel the exhaustion again under it like a floor returning after an elevator stops. When they left, lights quiet, she stayed a beat longer under the merciful fluorescence. She removed the EMS placard from her mirror and tossed it into the glove compartment the way you throw away a superstition you don't want to dignify by being gentle. On the drive home, every taillight looked like a plan and every shadow looked like a person taking a breath before making a decision. She laughed at herself once, the raw kind that burns, and turned the radio on to a morning DJ who had never met 3 a.m. and sounded smug about it. In her lot, she parked 2 spots from her usual because habits are how you get seen. She carried her jacket draped over one arm and her keys knuckled in the other hand because nothing says "come try" like a woman's empty hands at night. On her 3rd-floor landing, a neighbor's TV murmured through the door, some show about makeovers where people cry when they recognize themselves. Sarah unlocked her apartment and stepped into a room that still smelled like last night's pasta and a houseplant she was trying not to kill. She turned the deadbolt and leaned her forehead against the cool wood of the door for a count of 5, then moved because staying still in thresholds was a habit she didn't want to grow. At the sink, she washed her hands without needing to, scrubbed between fingers, under nails, the way muscle memory insists when the night has put its hands on your life. The water ran clear. She tasted metal anyway. On the table, her stun gun lay where she'd left it 3 weeks ago in its blister pack, unopened because she had thought of it as paranoia and then as a chore. She opened it now. It felt less like fear and more like homework. She read the safety instructions as if they were a med label she'd be quizzed on later. She plugged it into charge, red indicator glowing like a minor god. When the knock came at her door, 2 quick taps and a pause, she didn't jump. She looked through the peephole and saw a uniform the same officer from the shell had in his hands, a printout folded twice. "Sorry to bother you," he said when she chained and opened the 2-inch courtesy gap. "We rolled quick fuel, no one on scene. Clerk said his cam's been down a week." He didn't make air quotes with his fingers. He didn't have to. "We'll put extra patrols by the ramps. That lot gets weird around 3rd shift. Happens more than it should." He held up the paper. "Case number." "If you remember anything." She took it. He hesitated. "You live alone." She met his eyes. "I do." "You know what to do then," he said, neither patronizing nor flirtatious, and stepped back. When the hall was empty again, Sarah closed the door and slid the extra chain home. The apartment resumed its version of quiet. The fridge cycled, the AC clicked, the building settled. She set the case number on the counter and made a coffee she wouldn't finish. On her phone, a text from a coworker pinged, "You off?" "Heard a thing about the quick on 76. You good?" She typed, "Yeah, saw it," leaving notes for the probies. "Then buy a cheap mirror cling for passenger window, smile you're on camera, and carry your keys like you mean it." And then, because she believed in patterns you could hand to people, "Never turn your back to your car at 3 a.m. Her thumbs hovered. She added, "Don't stop at dead pumps, park under the working camera." If someone gets in your space with a calm voice, believe the content, not the tone. She hit send. The stun gun's indicator glowed behind her like a promise. At 4:02 a.m. she set 3 alarms, 1 to wake for her next shift, 2 to remind her not to talk herself out of buying pepper gel. She lay down on top of the covers in her work pants because unzipping was always the place exhaustion tried to win. She closed her eyes and saw the hooded figure's hands working at her door seam, the way someone who has practiced looks when they play the instrument they've chosen. She opened her eyes and saw the ceiling. She counted backward from 100 the way she taught patients breathing exercises in the back of the bus. She made it to 92 before sleep took her like a clean IV line, quick and efficient. 2 floors down, a car alarm chirped twice and stopped, a sound with no story attached. Somewhere along I-85, a patrol cruiser slowed under a half-lit canopy and an officer stared up at a dead camera and wrote a note in a little book because sometimes that was all there was. Sarah's Civic sat under a streetlight. Her passenger door wore a faint smear where a hand had tried to make a plan. In the morning she would see it, scrub it off with a blue rag that lived under her sink, and think about the way a stranger's voice had sounded when it said don't turn around, not frightened, not heroic, just a person who had met this night before and decided he didn't want to let it do what it liked again. She would say the same thing to someone else someday, as easily as flipping a nozzle into a tank. The text woke her before the alarm did. You up. From Maya Medic 12 at 10:11 a.m. Then a screenshot. Unknown accessory detected near you, the iPhone warning that pings when a tracker you don't own has been moving with you. Sarah stared at the blue bubble and felt the sleep leave her like a tide. She tapped her own phone awake. No alert. Relief crept in and stopped at the line where her memory of the hooded figure crouched by her door seam weighted like a thumbnail you could press to make the picture bigger. You okay? She typed. Yeah, it's my boyfriend's dumb keys. Maya sent a string of eye-roll emojis. But I heard about Quickfuel 76. You really walked it. Drove it, Sarah wrote, and left out the part where a stranger's voice had decided she should live. Write this in your Proby binder. Pay under working camera. Never turn your back to passenger side. If it's quiet at 3 a.m. assume it's quiet for a reason. Legend, Maya replied. The kind of praise you get from people who haven't had to survive on it yet. Sarah showered long enough to convince her body it had slept, tied her hair back, and drove to the precinct on Boulevard with a paper cup of gas station coffee she refused to dignify by calling coffee. The front desk officer looked at her badge, looked at the case number, slid a sign-in sheet across. Bureaucracy had a smell, same everywhere. Paper, toner, a whisper of Lysol that said if we can't fix it, we can at least disinfect it. A detective with a stitched name she didn't catch took her statement in a room where the chairs wanted to encourage honesty by discouraging comfort. He was good in the way good feels like okay. He let her talk. He wrote what mattered. He didn't pretend there would be an ending with a bow. Clerks sometimes run dead cameras to save on replacement, he said, scratching his pen like it could pull more sense out of the words. Sometimes they run them because they know who's coming and don't want a record. It's hard to prove which on a Tuesday. Pattern, she asked. He lifted a shoulder. There's always a pattern. It only turns into a case when someone bleeds on it. She thought of blood as both data and loss. You've had people pulled from their cars at that station. He didn't confirm and didn't deny. You did right. Don't turn your back, don't turn around. The phrase landed like a stone pushed across water. On her way out she passed a bulletin board where bolo sheets glared with bad copies of bad faces, the security cam pixelation turning eyes into empty calories. One was a pair of men in hoodies, generic enough to be everyone and no one. 2-person teams, the typed note said. Watch for third vehicle idling out of sight lines. A clipped photo showed a Camry with a rag over the plate. Outside, August's sun had decided to try on March and failed. The air felt like wet cotton. She got to her Civic and did something she had never done in daylight in a police parking lot. She crouched by her passenger door and ran a fingertip along the seam where metal meets rubber, then along the underside of the handle, looking for the itch of zip tie or fishing line. Nothing. The uselessness of the check relieved her anyway. She straightened and found the man in the leather jacket watching her from 10 feet away. He had not snuck. He had stood where people stand when they want to be seen after the fact doesn't make you scream. No cap now. His hair was a problem a barber hadn't solved. A line of yellowing bruise grade 1 cheekbone, the kind you get from a dashboard at 5 miles per hour. His hands were visible again, empty and intentionless. You charge your stun gun, he asked, as if they'd left the conversation at a different hour and needed to pick it back up where adults do. Sarah didn't look to see who else was looking. You don't give a scene more eyes than it deserves. Do I know you? You met me, he said, 2 hours ago in a lifetime. Don't worry, I'm not here to make a new problem in front of a precinct. He held something out, pinched between thumb and forefinger. A small black puck the size of a quarter, smudged with road grit. He let it sit in the air until she took it because she couldn't afford not to. Tracker, cheap kind. Magnet back, battery half dead if you believed the app someone else would have opened. Enough to ping a partner car if the driver didn't own the phone that got the Apple alert. Enough to follow a Civic to an apartment where keys jangled and doors sometimes didn't close right the first time. It wasn't on your car, he said, reading the way she thought. They don't waste the good ones on people who leave. It was on the sedan of a woman who did. I pulled it off before they could come fetch it. You pulled it off, Sarah said, mapping the pronouns. You were there after. I don't get to clock out. He nodded at the tracker. I pull what I can. It helps if someone who doesn't look like me turns it in. What do you look like? She asked. He smiled, and it was nothing like charming. Like a person security guards asked to move along. He looked past her at the precinct door as if measuring how long a conversation could survive under a camera. You want the short or the true? True, she said. They run that lot 3 nights a week, he said, brisk as a field report. 2-person ground team, sometimes 3 if they feel lucky. 1 lurker who preps the car, zip tie on handle, wedge in the door, soft valve the tire, sugar packet if they're stupid, tracker if they think you didn't notice. 1 watcher near the canopy to signal the pull car. pull car is usually a sedan with cardboard over one plate and the other plate wiped with diesel. Clerk either knows or knows better than to know. Watch the left hand. Real not seeing makes the left hand useless. Complicit not seeing lets it count money a little too carefully. Third man, sometimes there's a voice, he said. Sometimes on a Bluetooth, sometimes in a car, sometimes on a phone in a pocket, running the clock. They like women with uniforms, nurses, medics, vet techs. They like predictable routes. They like fatigue more than fear. And you? Sarah asked because the detective hadn't asked and wouldn't. His jaw set by habit and then unlocked. I pull what I can, I show up where they do. Some nights I make it harder. Some nights I move people out of the script. I can't be everywhere. Neither can uniforms. He touched the welted bruise on his cheekbone like he had to remind himself why it mattered. My sister didn't get someone like me. She got the wrong night of a right plan and a clerk who liked rent more than conscience. They recovered her car near the river 3 days later with the seat pushed back like the last person in it was a different size. I'm sorry, Sarah said, because sorry was a real word when you meant it, even if it didn't fix anything people pretended it did. His shrug had the grace of not caring whether she believed him. I don't need you to be sorry, I need you to be useful. She looked at the tracker in her palm, thumbed its magnet, felt the stickiness of something that wanted to keep touching things. You want me to take this inside? And to tell the truth the way people listen to, he said. You have a uniform that isn't a cop's, people like that. It doesn't come with the politics of are you writing me a ticket? It comes with did you save my dad? She almost laughed. You think medics aren't political. I think you get invited into kitchens, he said. You can tell a neighbor to stop parking at the edge of the lot. You can tell a clerk who isn't paid enough that if his cameras are always down on Tuesdays, someone will walk that paper to a person whose job is to ask why. You can tell your rookies never to fuel at a two-man station after midnight. You can tell your dispatchers what you're seeing so codes can go out to troopers when it pings a certain mile marker. That's the difference between a story you tell and a pattern. He said pattern with the same respect she gave protocol. Why me, she said, and didn't make it a question so much as the kind of complaint you utter to God when you're not sure you still believe in God. Because you didn't turn around, he said. Silence sat between them like a stool. A patrol sergeant walked past with a cardboard tray of coffees and a stack of old reports under his elbow, glanced at them, saw nothing to coach, and disappeared into his day. A bus coughed diesel on the corner. The world kept. He pointed at the tracker. If you turn that in out here, they'll toss it into evidence. It'll sit next to 30 other orphans waiting for a search warrant that needs a different case to justify the ink. He nodded toward the street. If you bring it to APD major crimes with a badge number and a case that starts with your name, it'll at least get logged where a human will remember it's in the drawer. People follow what humans remember. You talk like you used to sit in rooms like this, she said, glancing back at the precinct. Everyone sits in rooms like this eventually, he said. Some of us are there to be listened to, some are there to practice not shouting, some are there because sitting at home is worse. He turned to go the way men turn when they don't want to show you the reasons for their turning. There's a red Toyota with one headlight out that's been tailing the pull car lately, he said over his shoulder. If you see it twice in one night, bless the brake lights behind you. Name, she said, because it would bother her later if she didn't ask. Don't need one, he said, and the accent of the answer was old grief. But if you need to call me something in your head, call me Cole. He made it 10 paces before stopping. He didn't turn back. If you wake up to a second tracker alert, don't check under your bumper in your parking lot. Drive to the brightest place you can find and ask a stranger with their kids in the car to look with you. Predators hate witnesses who don't belong to the story. He left before she could tell him she didn't get the alert. She watched him become smaller and then become a man at a bus stop who could have been anyone. Inside, she asked for major crimes. They took the tracker, barcoded it, wrapped it in a paper bag that crackled self-importance. The detective with gray at his temples wrote possible series in the subject line of an email, and that was as much ceremony as the day would donate. On her drive home, she saw a red Toyota with one headlight dead waiting at a cross street 2 blocks off the feeder. It didn't pull out. She told herself thousands of Toyotas limped around with one eye. She told herself you can't build a life out of seeing. She took a different route anyway without thinking about it. At her building, she didn't pull into her spot. She looped past, rolled under the streetlight, and checked her rear view like a religion. Then she drove on to a grocery store with too much light and moms buying cold cuts for tomorrow. In the bread aisle, she asked a woman wrangling a toddler if she could do her a weird favor. Sure, the woman said, because toddlers teach you the word weird is just Tuesday with a hat on. They knelt by the Civic's rear wheel well together, holding their phones like torches at a campfire. Nothing stuck there but road, nothing hiding behind the mud flap. The woman's kid announced car 3 times like a herald and then demanded grapes which were duly awarded. Thanks, Sarah said, and meant for existing in public. You got stalker vibes, the woman asked, frank and useful. More like chess players, Sarah said, trying not to be a pawn. Girl, the woman said with the solidarity of someone who has learned the board by bruises, we upgrade you to bishop today. Back home, Sarah wrote a memo, not to APD, to EMS. She kept it short because long emails get saved and never read, and short ones end up on break room cork boards where coffee makes them holy. Subject, night fueling, route reminders for third shift. Hey, under a working camera, if you don't see a live red blink, don't swipe. Don't turn your back to passenger side, doors, seams, handles first. If you see the same civilian vehicle twice in different lots, assume it's on purpose. If a clerk's left hand never stops counting, their eyes never start seeing. If a calm stranger tells you a thing you already feel is true, believe the content, not the tone. If you find a tracker, don't remove it at home. Drive to light, borrow witnesses. If something feels scripted, break it. Leave, no apology. She hit send to the distribution list that included more rookies than veterans and hoped someone with a badge would pin it up with a thumbtack that cared. At 8:21 p.m., after a nap that made her mouth taste like coins, she went down to her car with a blue rag and a bottle of glass cleaner because there was a smear she'd let stay, and she didn't want it on her car in the morning. She found it again, an arc at the passenger window where fingers had slid black-green greasy. She scrubbed. The rag came away dark, and she scrubbed again and thought of a hand that liked to make its presence a residue. A sedan rolled past the lot entrance slow enough to be rude. Not the Camry from last night, not the red Toyota. This one was white with a driver who had perfected the art of not moving their head. Passed on, nothing more than a car. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "It's coal," the voice said, gravel over wire. "They're shifting to the Phillips on Riverdale tonight. If you have to fuel, don't." "I don't have to do anything tonight," she said. "Good," he said. He started to hang up and didn't. "If you want to see their car, it's a white Altima with a dent like a crescent moon on the rear bumper. Driver holds the wheel at 10 and 2. Passenger keeps his hand under his thigh like he's warming it for later." "Why are you telling me?" "Because," he said, "if you see them and call it in with adjectives that are worth a second look, maybe we get one night where a woman gets to go home and think the worst thing that will happen is she'll burn her dinner." The call clicked off without goodbye. She stood with the rag in her hand and listened to the building settling. At 10:03 p.m., her phone pinged with a push from a neighborhood app she kept for pothole complaints and occasional coyote sightings. Phillips 24, suspicious activity at pumps. Woman reported being followed. The comments were already happening, the way comments happen when fear has the keyboard. Some were useful, some wanted to turn crime into a team sport. Sarah typed call 911, don't debate. She didn't hit send. She put the phone down and looked at her keys on the counter like they were a choice she could ask someone else to make. She slept badly. Dreams made grocery aisles out of gas canopies, and the checker asked for her case number instead of a loyalty card. At 3:17 a.m., she woke to a sound that wasn't a sound so much as her body remembering one and deciding to practice it. The apartment was a faint blue DNR from streetlight. She lay still. The refrigerator sighed. The upstairs neighbor turned over like a man rolling out of a bad thought. Her phone buzzed once. A single dry vibration that said motion detected from the cheap camera she'd stuck in the window that afternoon on the advice of no one and everyone. She reached for it without sitting up and thumbed the app open. The Civic framed itself in grayscale. A shape moved at the edge of the curb, not close, not committing, just inside the camera's idea of interested. The figure wore a hood. The angle could have been a coincidence of clothing. The posture was, he didn't come to the door seam. He didn't crouch. He stood at the line where curb becomes street and kept his hands in his pockets like a boy not ready to go home. Then slowly, he lifted one hand and tapped his knuckles twice against the air, the gesture an echo rather than a knock. Sarah watched, breath held. The figure tilted his head toward the camera, toward the window. Then turned and walked away at a pace designed to tempt people who enjoy correcting other people's paces. Her door buzzed, soft as a bee. She went to it and looked through the peephole. No one. She looked down. A business card slid under the door, the kind that print shops make when $19 is what you have. Cheap stock black ink on the front, Cole. On the back in block letters, if you want out of the script, you have to stop playing your part. Under it, a number without a name and an address that wasn't a gas station. Riverside Diner, booth by the payphone, 11:30. She knew the place. Everyone knew the place. It was bright and lonely and open when no matter was supposed to matter. She turned the card over and over until the edges went soft. From the window, her car sat under the streetlight like a thing a person could own. And beyond it, the street lay flat as if a cardboard set painter had run out of depth. Sarah set the card on the counter next to the open stun gun box, next to the case number printout, next to the blue rag she hadn't bothered to wash. Then she put her phone face down and closed her eyes to see if any of this would feel less like a plan when she couldn't see it. 11:30 was a long time from 3:20, long enough to change your mind, long enough to pick a new script, long enough to discover that sometimes the way out is through the middle of the page. Outside, the lot stayed quiet. The camera watched. The hooded figure didn't come back, which was somehow worse than if he had. The gas station ambush. The Riverside Diner sat between a pawn shop and a car wash whose sign promised free vacuum with wash, like salvation could be bartered. The windows glowed the same color as hospital light, too white, too permanent. Inside, a dozen truckers and 3 ghosts of waitresses kept the world on caffeine. Sarah parked 2 spaces from the door under a light that hummed like an EKG flatlining. She scanned the mirrors first, habit now not fear, and then stepped out, jacket zipped to her throat though the air was warm. Cole was in the booth he'd written on the card, far wall half hidden by a jukebox that hadn't worked since the Obama administration. He looked smaller in daylight. His leather jacket was gone, replaced by a gray hoodie with grease at the cuffs. A coffee mug sweated beside his hand. He hadn't drunk it. "You came," he said, not smiling. "I said I would," she replied, sliding into the opposite seat. "I don't like owing strangers my curiosity." He nodded like she'd said something holy. "Good. Most people only come when they want a story to end." I want to understand, she said. Then I want to forget. You won't, he said and pushed a phone across the table. The screen showed a paused video, gas station security feed timestamped 2 nights ago. The angle was high canopy camera. In the image, a sedan idled at pump 3, driver's door open. A woman bent to hang the nozzle. 2 figures moved in the corner of the frame, deliberate as chess pieces. One by the rear tire, one by the passenger door. The woman straightened, turned, and the frame froze. That's last week, he said. She didn't make it to the highway. Sarah stared until her pulse felt like static in her jaw. You pulled this. Guy in maintenance still thinks I'm with the state task force. He owes me enough to not ask. And you want me to what, help you expose them? No, he said. You're a medic. You deal in after. I deal in before. He leaned in. You saw how fast they set up. They're professionals, not punks. They move every 48 hours, stay just below felony money. That's how they survive low-risk, steady harvest. They know no one chases misdemeanors at 3 a.m. And you, she asked. I break their rhythm, make them work too fast, make mistakes, get a plate, a face, a fingerprint left behind. He sipped the coffee, winced at its age. But last night they knew me. They're adapting. I need a new witness before I stop being useful. Sarah understood what he wasn't saying. Before they erase me. You're putting me in this, she said quietly. I'm giving you a choice, he said. Once you see a pattern, you either trace it or pretend the paper's blank. She looked out the window. A family was loading a toddler into a booster seat, the mother laughing at some small rebellion, normal life. She envied it like oxygen. What if I just walk away, she asked. Then you'll still look at every pump like it's a trap, Cole said, but you'll be alive. That's a win in this math. He slid a folded envelope across the table. Plate numbers, partials, and a list of stations they've hit. You give this to your detective friend, the one with the temple gray. He won't ignore it if it comes from you. She hesitated. Why not bring it yourself? Because my name's not Cole, he said, standing. And I don't need another file drawer with my face in it. He left a 10 on the table and walked out without looking back. The bell over the door jingled once, an ordinary sound that felt like punctuation. Sarah drove straight to the precinct. The detective wasn't in, but she left the envelope in her card. The clerk promised to root it up. The words meant filed and forgotten, but she'd done what she could do. That night she dreamed of the hooded man crouched by her car again, except now he looked up and had no face, just a reflection of her own eyes staring back. 2 days later, a news alert buzzed her phone. Attempted carjacking at Riverdale Phillips, suspect shot by civilian. She didn't click, she already knew what she'd read. Cole, or whoever he was, had decided to take the rule to its last line. At the station, the detective cornered her near the vending machines. Your friend's file helped, he said. We got 2 of them in custody. One ran. We found trackers matching that serial batch. He studied her face. You did good. I just delivered mail, she said. Still counts. He paused. You okay? Define okay, she said, and walked away before he could. Home felt smaller now, the air too still, the locks too thin. She kept the stun gun charged, kept a flashlight by the door, and moved the EMS placard from the glove compartment to the trash. Sometimes when she fueled before dawn on the hospital lot, she'd catch herself scanning reflections in glass. The angle of the canopy light, the twitch of a shadow that might be a sleeve. Her heart would stutter, then steady. She'd remember Cole's last words, once you see the pattern, you either trace it or pretend it's blank. She still traced it, quietly. Reported odd license plates to a friend in dispatch, taught rookies new rules. They started calling it Vega's protocol. Pay under the camera, never turn your back, keep your hands visible. Believe the calm voice, not the story. No one knew the origin, that was fine. One evening, months later, as she walked to her car after a shift, she noticed a new note tucked under the wiper, plain white paper. Block letters, keep your lights on, they don't like light, see. She looked around, lot empty, sky low and humid, a storm promising itself. She folded the note into her pocket without smiling, started the engine, and flooded the asphalt with halogen. When the rain came, it erased the smear on her window for good. But sometimes, driving home through the empty stretch of highway, she'd still hear it. The faint echo of a man's voice through the static of her radio, saying the only rule worth keeping. Don't turn around.